are we having another issue with people going not live? Oh, I have a feeling that we needed our tin hats on earlier. There we go. There we go. Go ahead, you froze. But you had tornadoes, so we'll give you a break.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, well, here I am now, and the sage is going. So welcome to the show. Smell the sage and let it whisk away anything. We just don't need all that with us right now. Just let it all go. And today we are going to have an amazing guest. So I'm Teresa Warren. We have Rhonda Elliott, Bex Marie, and today we're meeting somebody with some really special energy that I can't wait to meet. On one hand, she's this amazing skilled hypnotherapist, and on the other hand, she's an actor, a dancer, a vocalist, and you work with jazz and things. I mean, oh my God, you wear a whole lot of really interesting hats. So I'm excited to meet you. Welcome, Lesley.
Thank you. Well, the tinfoil hat is the best one. That's for sure. But yes, I've done a lot of things. Well, I come from a show business family, I should say. So entertainment is a family business. You know, you open the refrigerator door and you've got to do 15 minutes. That's how it was when I was growing up. And my dad was a very successful comedy writer for television, all kinds of shows that you would know, All in the Family, Mary Tyler Moore, he created Mork and Mindy. So I kind of grew up in that environment. So if I hadn't gone into some performing act of show business, it would be like, you know, spitting on the family accomplishments in a sense. So, but I always had a duality of interests, many interests, but probably the biggest thing was an interest in metaphysics and also an interest in medicine in general. And I did really begin my career in mental health care many years ago when I was a student at university. I worked my way through school by working all night in a state mental hospital. And so that's kind of my ground zero. That's where I really was compelled to relieve human suffering, especially then. You know, I'm really bloody old. So we're talking about mental health care when dinosaurs roamed the earth. I mean, it was very primitive. We didn't really even have antidepressants at that time. That was about to come a little bit later, but many people were psychotic and they did all of these useless things to them, and it was really terrible. So my commitment even today, maybe especially today, and through my work with individuals using hypnotherapeutic techniques, is to, you know, relieve suffering, whether it be suffering behind a drug habit or suffering with, you know, possibly ETs entering your bedroom every night, you know, whatever the suffering is, whatever the point of hurt is, you know, I want to go in there and use these ancient techniques that are 6,000 years old or more to relieve suffering.
Wow. I love that. Rhonda, I can't hear you.
Sorry, I was trying to fix some technical difficulties because I'm sure people were screwing with this. Lesley, you said you've had some experiences, but I was thinking when you said my dad wrote for Mork and Mindy, do you think? No, I'm serious.
Yeah.
Like, these things don't just come from nowhere.
I know you're right, and even, you know, in my dad's case, I believe he wrote the episode of Happy Days that first introduced Mork, and then it became a series. So I would have to say that my father was fascinated with space, but and probably completely believed that it was possible that there was an ET presence, but that may have been about as far as it went. But he was obsessed with NASA, and he was obsessed when we went to the moon in that little tin can, and you know, he was obsessed with it. But you're right, you know, thoughts are things, and and I think a lot of what happens in the media, especially contemporary media, is almost, channeled information. I think disclosure is generally speaking, a gentle process, and has been, whenever it occurs, whenever a civilization is ready for it to occur. And, the whole encounter panorama of beings that make contact with us is pretty breathtaking. There are a lot of beings, and I believe firmly that some of them are omnidimensional or multidimensional, and aren't
I have a
necessarily.
question.
Yes.
Thinking of all these beings and things, I'm kind of excited, but I'm thinking, when you're hypnotizing someone, are you helping them unlock their memories, or are you able to have experience with that particular ET yourself?
Well, it's all about the patient or the client. So what I do is, generally when people reach out to me, and I will say that most of the time they're somewhere in midlife. So this is part of their personal evolution, I believe. And there comes a point, I don't believe that memory blocks can last forever. Whether they were put in place by the U.S. government or whether they were put in place by benevolent ETs, so we're not shocked. I think they last maybe about 20 years. And then after that, individuals start to get bleed through memories. It's a very much it's very much like what happens in post-traumatic stress disorder. The incidents can be buried for a long time, but they often will begin to come out with flashes like that. So that's, generally speaking, most of the people that come to me have experienced that. And they may also have big consciously recalled memories of being a child and going on a craft or you name it. So it's kind of a mashup, generally speaking. But I think that when someone comes to me, I have to take a really detailed history of their experiences, because, and this is an awful thing to even put out there, but not everybody who contacts me is an experiencer. There can be people with mental health issues, and mental health issues do not preclude the fact that they could also be experiencers. Right. But unfortunately, in the great country of Canada, I'm not really allowed to venture into psychotherapy. So I am legally, as a master hypnotherapist, it is illegal for me to treat anyone with a diagnosed mental health disorder. Now, by that, we don't mean just, depression or anxiety or a bit of agoraphobia. What we mean by that is something like bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, dissociative disorder, schizophrenia.
I got all those.
Do you have those?
I got all those. Yeah.
Me too. So, but interestingly enough, and I don't often talk about this part of therapy, but there are some clients who, after we've worked together for a while and we've explored and recovered memories and integrated them into the individual's consciousness, there can be a kind of a channeling that takes place.
Yeah.
And there are some individuals who have, for lack of a better term, I'm going to call them guides, because they are a contact point for an individual. And you would be surprised at how many lifelong experiencers have a go-to being, a person that sort of looks after them and guides them and helps them through these experiences. So
like a handler.
Yes, like a handler, more like a publicist.
Yeah, okay.
More like a handler than a guide, because these beings are primarily in a corporeal form, and many beings that make contact with us are very similar to us in shape. And I think we have a genetic relationship with Lyrans, Pleiadians.
Yeah.
Those what you would call the Nordics. We share DNA with them, and in fact, the Anunnaki were considered part of the Lyran group of civilizations. So, however it got here, panspermia, however it got here, I believe that we are the hybrids, and we're holding very special DNA. And a lot of things are starting to happen now with regard to just waking up.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I think
Time
people
capsules are waiting for us.
Mhm. Absolutely.
I'm asking for a friend. So do you find your experiencers are kind of followed all their lives and that they keep experiencing things or keep,
I really don't believe there is any such thing as a single experience for people who have seen craft or what. I really think that most individuals have had multiple experiences throughout their lives. They just don't recall them consciously.
Right.
That seems to be the pattern, because even when people come to me with say it's a single conscious memory, and they're an adult. One of the things that I try to do is as I take the individual back in time in this lifetime to the earliest incident of high strangeness. And I try not to ever really say, I try to say it without saying it, because I don't want to plant any sort of suggestions in anybody's mind. So, but what invariably I find is that these encounters, and I don't like to call them abductions, because I believe that by and large, experiencers have agreed to be conduits for disclosure in the interlife before they entered this physical body.
I agree.
There are agreements in place, probably for all of us, that we would be getting out the word, with this new technology, not new in the great scope of things, but new to us. So I would have to say that the majority of people who come to me are lifelong experiencers, and I've ruminated long and hard on why, and the answer that keeps coming up is, of course, the aspect of these individuals agreed to play this role, but I think it's also that the benevolent ETs that we deal with most often really find it a lot easier to engage with people who have psychic or PSI ability. And because I think that as encounters go on in an individual's life, they seem to become less and less physical and more about what I would have to call astral projection. So, in other words, the spirit or intelligence can travel and operate and function with ETs. I think that many of the beings we deal with are operating at a higher vibrational level. So we need a step up transformer, we need. But failing that, I think psychic ability, and it runs in families. It's much easier to track during the matrilineal line, which doesn't mean it doesn't exist in the patrilineal line, but it's easier to find out about because women were allowed to be more sensitive or intuitive, right? I think it's just conditioning. I don't think it's a spiritual difference. It's just conditioning. But I mean, think about it for a minute. If you're Jane Goodall and you're in the center of Africa and you discover a new type of primate, and there's a tribe of them, and this group of primates, maybe 4 or 5 of them have epiglottal formations that are humanoid, and they're able to actually formulate words. Now, wouldn't you spend most of your focus dealing and learning and teaching those primates that could talk?
Yeah.
So I think it's just easier. And it may be that people who have psychic ability are all carrying special DNA. Why not? Why not? If it travels genetically, there must be a certain genetic configuration that we just do not understand yet.
Right. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
There's 2 ways the family line can go. You can, in your genetic line, you can follow all the way back through your mother's line. But I'm wondering, because you don't always incarnate into the same families, would your soul still be followed because of the agreements or whatever? Do you know what I mean?
I believe so. I believe we are followed throughout incarnations.
Okay.
They are able to, and also we are often born within the same family in reincarnation. To switch, it's a repertory cast of players, and you switch parts. And my evil stepmother becomes my beloved sister. So it's always
choose your own adventure, almost. Like,
yeah, choose your own adventure. And from doing so much work in past life regression and interlife regression, I really believe, girls, that it is a universe of free choice.
Yes.
And I even, so when you're born into humble circumstances or weird circumstances, it is the learning experience that you have chosen. And some of them are horrendously tough. But those of us that come down here in the cruel school to incarnate here, we are actually learning at a much higher and deeper rate than individuals who have chosen not to take physical form.
Right.
Yeah, isn't that fascinating?
That is
a school of hard knocks.
Yeah,
And
literally
the cruel school. This is it. It's which is why I really can't get behind, and I hate to point out David Icke, but he's the main proponent of the nasty, evil reptilians running the world. I have found it's not that there aren't reptilian civilizations. Some are benevolent, wonderful. Some are not so nice, but
just like people.
So I think this takes away responsibility from us to manifest our society. I don't think we need any help from any other beings being cruel and horrible to each other. I think it is a learning process. We practically just climbed out of the primordial slime, and we have a lot to learn. And kindness, love,
Passion.
These are the things that propel the universe, I believe. And it's not that I don't, it's not that I'm in la la land, not accepting that evil exists, but I just don't think we need any help from other beings to be as evil as it gets. I'm not afraid of what's out there. I'm more afraid of what's down.
Yeah, my mom always said, "Don't be afraid of the dead. It's the living you used to have to worry about."
Yeah, so, really, the same kind of thing. So, and I do, many times people will ask me, well, how many species have you heard about, and as I said, it's quite diverse. Now, I'm going to digress for just a moment. Oh gosh, what was his name? Do you remember, or did you ever have the privilege to talk to Paul Hellyer? He was an author of many books, and he was also the Secretary of Defense for Canada. He was he was also the Vice Premier of Ontario, big political figure in Ontario, and a complete, he was part of the big press conference in Washington, D.C., the big disclosure press conference, two of them at least. Anyway, Paul Hellyer, before he passed, and he lived to be practically 100, God bless him. I asked him that same question about the varieties and species. And he said to me, at this point, to my knowledge, the Canadian government has diplomatic relations and treaties and such with 80 different species.
80, wow.
And if and anything that Canada is doing, I mean, they're in bed with the U.S.
The U.S. is doing 10 times as much.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But there are all of those, well, maybe as Americans you may not know this. There are a series of joint U.S. Canadian military bases, high-tech nuclear military bases that line what we call the DEW line. It's up north and far enough north that our bases, the purpose was they were designed to be able to see anything coming out of Russia and to blow it out of the sky. And this was in the Cold War. This was, this is how old these bases are. But we have a conjoined military program with Canada, with the UK, and we pretty much share everything. I would like to know what was in Prince Philip's private files myself, because he was a huge aficionado of ufology, and I'm sure that he got a chance to see some top secret stuff. But yeah, so that's kind of my feeling that and now I have heard about all kinds of different varieties of grays. Some are benign, some are not so benign, and I think some are not fully physical in the sense that they perhaps are engineered beings for space travel. Yeah. And they're sort of like minions, and they work in collaboration with
like androids almost.
With Nordics. Yes, I believe that because you can't get any thoughts out of them. That when my people are in trance, they are communicating telepathically with beings all the time. But these small grays that are sort of like drones, they can't get any thoughts out of them. So that's one thing I base that on. I have heard about insectoids, and believe it or not, insectoids are by and large loving, wonderful beings.
Yeah.
Can we just have a real mammalian, preference in our.
Yeah, but I really used to love praying mantises. It was an obsession when I was a kid.
Well,
I wonder why.
I bet it was a being that you knew or had contact with. In fact, one gentleman that I've worked with for years on and off, I mean, we're still recovering memories because he was part of the secret space program. And he had a special being, kind of like the handler that we were talking about, that he called Kern. And Kern was a large mantis-like being who was intelligent and loving and always wore, robes to try and not shock anybody. But Kern can also project himself in a kind of a holographic way. So he wasn't always on the craft that like my client was on. But if my client needed to speak with him, he could use the phone in a sense, and project himself in that kind of way. So now, and of course, reptilians, there are again many varieties. Now, another individual several individuals that I work with, both male and female, who were also part of this secret space program, super soldier program, whatever you wish to call it. They have told me about reptilian beings that live on Mars, near the Mars Defense Force, and they live underground. And every once in a while, there's a skirmish. They'll come out and fire something, and we'll fire something back. And it's been that way for years and years and years. But there are also apparently reptilians who are rogue, who live in space, and who do go to planets and try to take their natural disasters. But I mean, their natural
resources.
Assets. Yeah, their natural assets. But right now, I've also heard that from all of these people that we are pretty much in control of who gets into our solar system. So I don't think that these are realistic fears to, like the movie Independence Day. I
more like Stargate, eh?
Yeah, more like Stargate. And I believe that there are vortices and wormholes. And in fact, I'm so excited about this because this was recently. I had a chance to speak to a major researcher at Mount Shasta. And as you probably know, there's all kinds of phenomena that goes on.
Oh yeah. Sure.
And believe it or not, there have been organized communication groups, ET communication groups in that area for 30 years. And what's happening now, and there's been contact, there's been physical presences. What's happening now is they are introducing Earthlings, these beings who appear to be Nordics, I will call it. They are introducing Earthlings to what they call a Zendra, which seems to be a kind of portable Stargate, if you will. But it's more like a room. And what they're doing at first is they're letting one of these vortices, one of these Zendras can hold, I don't know, maybe 20 people or something comfortably. So they'll let 20 people, they'll form the Zendra. They'll stand in it themselves, the beings, and then welcome like 20 beings in. And so without actually going anywhere, just by stepping into this altered environment, human beings are beginning to understand how we really communicate and travel through space and dimensions. You know, it's not going to involve people going into cryonic suspension and getting in a ship. It's a generation ship that takes, you know, hundreds of years to get anywhere. That's couldn't be farther from the truth.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm just soaking this all up because it's just so fascinating. So have you found, you know, obviously with people starting to wake up and have more experiences, things are really they're unfolding at a rapid rate now, more than we've ever experienced in the history of humanity. So
absolutely.
Are the collective themes you're receiving through these sessions with your clients, maybe lately, that have been kind of all tying together?
They do all tie together. And you know, for some reason, thank goodness, you know, the people that are seeing me, they're really only benevolent beings with benevolent messages coming through. But the big message that we first heard with Betty and Barney Hill, the environmental concerns, destroying the earth, destroying the plant life. They've told us there's a cure for everything that can happen to us physically on this planet. And so a lot of what I am hearing is, you know, wake up, fix the planet, fix yourselves, basically. You know, it's like having, you know, it's like when my kids, you know, were growing up, I wanted to fix everything for them. But at a certain point, I had to try and control myself and say, well, they need to learn this. They need how to learn to do this on their own. I'm only going to impede them by interfering. And I think it's a bit like that. A lot of the beings seem to have a very parental feeling towards us. I think it's I do believe it's our genetic relationship. They see us as cousins, you know, and
they must follow a prime directive like they did on Star Trek.
I think there
Non-interference.
is. Yes. I absolutely believe there's a non-interference prime directive, just like Starfleet on Star Trek, just like Gene Roddenberry envisioned. I really believe that is true. And of course, we've had people violating that. You know, I would have to bring up, you know, go back way before the end of World War II, before the first A-bomb. We were engaging, or in fact, we call it the Truman Agreement. President Truman engaged with gray beings, the beings that had crashed in the Roswell crash. There was not one crash, there were 3 crashes. And in exchange for some technology that we could handle, you know, integrated circuits, some of these things that came up that were just so fast and ridiculous. It was too fast. You know, integrated circuits, fiber optics, you know, Velcro.
Velcro was Canadian. No.
Yeah, that's right. Got to take credit for that. But these in exchange for, and this is what these grays wanted, these zeta reticulates. They were having terrible fertility problems. They couldn't reproduce anymore, and they didn't understand why. And our DNA was roughly compatible, and so they were doing a massive genetic research program that went on since the end of World War II up until I'm going to say the 80s. The early 80s is when the agreement finally timed out. But Truman signed the agreement. Eisenhower continued with the agreement. And those grays did honor the end of the agreement. But certainly no one had any idea, least of all Truman, what was going to be involved with taking this genetic material. They didn't even know what genes were, you know. So a lot of dear people continuously had ova taken and sperm taken. There are women that were essentially used as incubation pods where they would, you know, insert a fertilized being of some sort. And this went on and on and on. So there are these horrible stories, and it did happen. But this day and age, it would be very unusual for me to find one of those experiencers. They would be, you know, and I'm 67, they would be my age or older, probably, at this point.
Wow.
So it doesn't happen that often that someone walks in with that type of experience. Thank God.
Yeah.
Because that must be traumatizing for you.
Some of the things that I have heard, but I must say, the most traumatizing and hideous and awful things that I have ever heard have happened just in regular therapy with, earth residents.
Right.
You know, the worst things that I have heard about what people can do to each other is I have heard just in your day-to-day therapy.
Right.
So, yeah.
That brings me up with the screen memories. And Teresa was mentioning her interest. So she has a question, but I'm wondering if people use screen memories of ETs, like they actually think of when it's a human being that's doing this stuff to them.
I think all kinds of things go on. It's absolutely true that beings use screen memories, and I feel that they do it so we are less frightened by their, shall I call it, their genodiversity, because you could have insectoids working with reptilians, working with greys, working with Nordics. It's all a big mashup, and they don't really want to frighten anybody. In fact, when kids are taken, the ETs go to a lot of trouble to make sure they're not seen. And I will often have people, when I regress them, they talk about the brown doctors. And these seem to be some type of reptilian, a benevolent reptilian, but they don't want to disturb anybody, and they don't like to be seen. So screen memories are often used. I have a great example of that. One of my clients, who had been taken since he was a very, very little guy, was transported, and he feels this was very physical. Like, as I said, the childhood experiences, they float you through the window, through the roof. It seems to be very physical. So he was he was taken, but then suddenly he was in a house that just looked like a regular Toronto sort of Victorian era house. And it was supposed to be a birthday party. And so there were balloons and other things around, and he was sitting in a circle with a whole bunch of other children, and some of them were like sound asleep, like turned off. Some of them were semi-conscious. So it was a whole different level of consciousness that was going on. But he became aware at some point that he was supposed to go in for a checkup from the doctor. And he started to get agitated and angry because he was surly. He was going to be 13, and their 13-year-olds are heinous at the best times. Yeah. So he was being really surly and cranky and bad, and so then out of the door came a being, and I know this was supposed to make the kids feel more comfortable, but he was wearing a doctor's coat and had on and was either wearing a big clown mask or it was a clown.
Oh, clowns!
And I don't think they know that many of us have onophobia, which is fear of clowns. So they're not perfect. So the doctor, comes out with a big clown mask.
Oh my gosh!
And my guy goes nuts and says, "I'm not going to do that," and turns over a table. It's all very physical. And the next thing he recalls is he lands down in his bed like they had dropped him from 6 feet. And he's walking away.
You're out.
Yeah, they're out. So the screen memories, I think, are used more where people are likely to be frightened or in experiences with children.
And what about yours, Teresa? Was yours like anything like that?
Not that exciting. No clowns involved. Just
it wasn't anywhere near as exciting. But what I will tell you is I was working as a young actress in a summer stock company. And I was very young. I finished high school at 16, so I was only 16. And I was out there in this far away. I was in I was in South Dakota, where the Rushmore Heads are, the Black Hills of South Dakota, which is a big #1 area for sightings anyway, because it's sacred. It's sacred Native American land.
Right.
And so anyway, I met on this year with the company, an actress singer who was there, and she seemed like, really old. She was probably 30. Maybe she was 30. And she had had a very successful career in Vegas, singing and blah blah blah. And she had a car, so we were driving to the pub one night through this circuitous route, and I noticed that we were being followed by really consistent lights. Now, there's no airplane traffic in the Black Hills. It doesn't exist. So this was definitely something unusual, and the craft is coming closer, and it just looked like three balls, 1, 2, 3, and the balls did change positions. And so I said to her, "Do you see that?" She said, "Oh yeah." I said, "Well, what do you think it is?" She says, "Well, there's something I have to tell you, but I don't just work in Vegas as a singer. I'm very psychically gifted, and I have been working with the government in communication with ETs, non-physical communication with ETs." And she said, "And now I want to stop. I want to quit because it's exhausting, and they never leave me alone because they don't understand sleep." So she just wanted to quit, and they wouldn't let her. So all summer long, going back and forth at night, I saw craft. I saw it at one point. I saw craft that was close enough to where I could detect windows, and it looked like beings in the windows. So it was quite something. Now, the denouement of this whole story is one afternoon on this same season of the theater, I was hanging out at the snack bar doing nothing, which I excelled at. And I looked across to the dorm where my girlfriend was living, and I saw this big car pull into the circular drive in front of the theater, and it really was although this was only 1972, it looked like it looked like a Men in Black car, like a Chrysler car, but maybe older, not fins, but around that time. So the car speeds in, dust is flying, and they pull up to her door. Now, at this point, and this is very odd, there are 300 people in this camp. The acting company, the tech people, the musicians, 300 people. No one is around, just me in this major intersection. So I see these two beings get out of the car, and I'm going to say beings because they were very strange looking. They were wearing, 1940s George Raft suits with shoulder pads. Right, they had on the fedora. They were out of time, out of space. And I remembered this actually kind of recently, that they were wearing, their pants were too short, and they were wearing what looked like big orthopedic shoes. So I wonder if they were weighted shoes for our gravity. I don't know. So anyway, they go into my friend's dorm, and I'm sitting there, and I think, well, this isn't right. I'm going to have to go in there. I'll give it 5 minutes. I don't know what I was going to do. Assault them with my tuna sandwich. I don't know what I'm going to do. So anyway, just as I was about, milliseconds before I was about to walk across that space and go right into her room, they left. And in the same way they came in, they jumped into this outdated Buick town car and sped out. So that wasn't. And then later, I went right over there. I said, "What the hell was that?" She said, "Well, those were just they were just beings who work with our government, trying to convince me to stay involved." Wowie. So that was the extent. So my experience wasn't so much like a being who came out of a craft or said, "Come on, Lesley, come on board." It really wasn't like that, but I observed. I had many sightings of lighting and craft phenomena, and I saw these two beings. I have another story for the next season, but it's too long and it's very creepy, so we're not going to go there today. But
here's a question: do you find that people that come to you, or people that seem to be experiences or contactees, are similar in certain ways? Like, I noticed that your friend, she was a psychic, and she was also an actress, actor, dancer, like you.
I think there are an awful lot of people in the arts who also have intuitive abilities. And having said that, I would simply say that if I were to take the people that come to me are so diverse that I can't really make that a requirement for being an experiencer, although that I have observed being involved in the arts. But I think it's a natural connection, and I think if we really got in there, I mean, they estimate that 14 million people have had serious close encounters.
Wow.
And I was involved with both the MUFON and the free experiencer research programs, and we found that the people were very diverse that were reporting experiences, and that's the only way we can know. Obviously, there are many people who don't report anything.
Right.
I mean, and there are Native Canadians and Native Americans who call in the sky people through ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
So there's all kinds of stuff going on.
The first CE5 communications wasn't made by, human, like white guys. Yeah.
But I have had people, I have had lawyers, doctors, lots of teachers. I'd say if there's a profession that is most widely represented in the demographic of the experiencers I work with, I would say it's educators.
That makes sense. So,
Yeah.
So if they're contacted with their young, like I think most people are when they're very young, when they're more open to it, then maybe they're just inspired to go in those directions, or maybe it's something that opens up in them. I'm wondering if the experience makes the way they go on further in life.
I think they come in as teachers. I think they come disseminators of information, disseminators of information, communicators. I think that is, I'm not including myself, but those wonderful beings, those people that come to me and other people are bridging the gap between the dense physicality of our earthly plane, which is not always easy for ETs to penetrate and function in.
Right.
Wow.
exactly.
Just incredible. So can you tell us what a session of yours would look like, and how it goes? Because I think there's lots of people that, like myself, who have had hypnotherapy for other things like grinding your teeth.
Oh, yeah.
Teeth grinders. Okay, that's another thing. And it's kind of strange being hypnotized. Can you explain a little bit of what you do?
Well, in working with experiencers, I'm going to use regression techniques, and for that we try to get someone into a maybe slightly deeper trance than the alpha state. For most hypnosis, we only need to get people to alpha state. They're completely conscious. They're just relaxed. But once the body gets relaxed, then that little membrane that separates our conscious mind from our subconscious mind just dissolves. And of course, the subconscious mind is also where the memory centers exist. That's where behaviors are formed. So I think that what I try to do in regression is we induct someone into I do a particularly long regression. I spend about 45 minutes of time getting that person into the depth of trance that I feel will work. So I just take my time. Now, before I ever get to that point, I think, as I mentioned earlier, but just in passing, I do a really extensive intake. And now I have kind of I wouldn't say it's a rule, but kind of a policy where I don't always engage in a regression session unless someone has at least a partially recalled conscious memory.
Yeah.
And that there, will often tell me a lot about whether somebody is delusional or whether they have most probably had a bona fide experience.
Right.
So that's the intake is very important. Then they will usually, and I can do this process online, and I have done, especially during COVID, but my preference would be to do this kind of process in person. I have my own treatment space. So I spend about 45 minutes inducting them into a deep, comfortable state of trance, the theta state, if possible. then one of two things will happen. Sometimes I will visit the experience of the partially recalled memory right away. Like that's the first place we'll go. Or if the person seems to be particularly receptive and not really hooked into linear time very strongly, you know, then I will take them back. We'll travel back in time, only visiting happy times. I make this all very positive. We travel back in time to, as I said, the first occasion of high strangeness. And then once I have an idea about where that is, which is usually 3, something like that, 3, 4, then we can move forward. Then I just sort of let instinct take over. Then I just say, let's travel to the next significant experience. And I just let it unfold as the person wants to have it unfold. And I record everything, of course. And, you know, a big part of this work is what I would have to call the aftercare. It's about the integration of the experience. Some people that come see me have been suffering from insomnia and nightmares and all kinds of stuff for most of their life. So I, through this revelatory process, we can make a lot of that stuff go away. You know, we can, because it's just fear-based. It's just fear-based. And once we start dissolving, once we start what's the word, disrupting those neural pathways for fear and terror, once we start closing those down, then there's a lot more room for understanding and joy and participation. And the way I have developed these specific techniques of regression for experiencers is I have simply adapted tried and true past life, interlife regression processes. So, you know, I owe an awful lot to Michael Newton.
I love Michael Newton.
Devotee of Michael Newton. His work in interlife regression is groundbreaking and still is groundbreaking. And so I've taken these, and my own mentor, Dr. Georgina Cannon, no relation to Dolores Cannon, but Dr. Georgina Cannon, who has worked very closely with Shirley MacLaine for many years, she's my mentor. So I learned metaphysical hypnosis from her.
So your session would be like 2 hours? Would that be what?
Yeah, that's really about right. And of course, again, it depends on how slow a verbal processor someone is. In other words, sometimes, you know, I'll have someone in my hypno chair and I'll ask them a question and I'll see all this REM activity going on and it's just silence. And I have to remind them, tell me what's happening. Just describe it for me. Tell me what's happening. Some people, it's just like turning on a spigot and so much information comes out. Thank God I record it because in those cases, it's just too much to try to write down or anything like that.
Yeah, it's so cool. Yeah, it's so cool. Yeah, I've had quantum healing done by Garnet Shu.
And it is quantum healing because when someone has had a extra dimensional experience, the soul and the heart need to be healed in all dimensions of space and time. There are things, the ETs don't always know. This is when they are upsetting us. They are not perfect. They're like us. They're just a little bit ahead in the road. That's all.
Right.
Not even that far ahead. But, but go ahead.
I was just thinking, and they think that repressing these memories in our brain is helping us, but really they sit there like little daggers in our consciousness, always poking us, and we're trying to reach for them.
That's right. That's right. They don't truly understand memory, our memory, how it works, and how damaging the suppression of memories can be. For instance, I mentioned the case of Betty and Barney Hill earlier, which is, I would say ground zero for contemporary ufology.
Right.
And, about 2 years after Betty and Barney had their amazing experience, they were both suffering from an array of psychological issues and fears and what have. So they finally went to see Dr. Bernard Simon. Now, Dr. Simon was an expert in, what they would have called shell shock. Not even PTSD. They didn't have that term then. So he had no experience in ETs or no experience in other than soldiers in battle. And so so what he did is he was trying to do, I guess, some sort of double blind study. So he took Betty and Barney and had separate sessions with them. And then after he finished each session with each individual, he would give them the, commandment to push everything back in, and they would remember nothing about the session. Now, this is horrific.
Even worse, right?
This is a horrifically poor clinical practice, but you have to give them. No one knew. And so, particularly Barney's suffering was very protracted. That poor man, he was really never the same after that experience. And I would just mention that, my dear friend Kathy Martin, who is the niece of Betty Hill, the late Betty Hill, has just come out with a new 60th anniversary version of Captured, which she co-wrote Stanton Friedman, and it has a lot more evidence in it. It's very, very enhanced. So if anyone is interested about that incident and diving into it more deeply, pick up Captured by Kathy Martin.
Which brings me to your book. Can you tell us just a little bit about your book, and then we'll get you to tell us where people can find you?
Oh, sure. Well, my recent book is called Intersections, A True Story of Extraterrestrial Contact. And what it is the journey of one remarkable man, one experiencer, lifelong experiencer. It is his journey through recovery of memories over something like 20 plus sessions. I knew that I was going to do a book with this case, and he was extremely cooperative. And so the interesting thing I think about our book, as opposed to maybe some other things with the same type of subject matter, is my book really details the personal experience that Wes Roberts went through as he began to recover these memories. So I have I recorded everything. I have a lot of literal transcriptions in there. And I think, anyone who's interested in the subject matter can get an incredibly in-depth look into what goes on in regression.
Are you going to put it in audiobook form? Because I love audiobooks.
I have somebody requested, I think I really should do that.
You've got a great voice. Why wouldn't you do it?
Thank you. It never occurred to me until someone else mentioned. Now, 2 people have mentioned it, so that means the message, and I got to do it. So.
I mean,
you gals have your antenna up on
Oh, I think you have your antenna up too.
Yes.
Now, how can people find you? And I know you're in Toronto, which is just up the road, about 4 hours from me. I'm in Ontario. I'm in Eastern Ontario, just south of Ottawa.
Oh, okay.
So, and Teresa is in Tennessee, and Bex is in New Hampshire.
Right.
Wow.
And we've never met in person. I guess we always tell people that. We've just known each other for about 7 years. So, I know, internet's great. So you do Zoom.
Yes, I do. I absolutely can work on Zoom. I didn't think it was possible, but I've always done a little bit of it. But then with the COVID situation being what it was, my whole practice went online for a while. So yes, I've gotten pretty relaxed about it, and it works beautifully. Now I can always be reached at Lesley, Lesley, at lightworkhypnosis.com, and that's all one word, all lowercase, lightworkhypnosis.com. And I would love to hear from your audience. If you have a question, a comment, if you want to share some of your experience, whatever it is, I absolutely get back to everyone. It may take me a couple days, but I do. And I would love to hear from you.
That's awesome. I'm sure I'm going to have some experience tonight if the skies are clear. I just got a feeling.
Yeah.
Every time I talk about it, they come out.
Yeah, they'll be out tonight. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I've got my husband on board. He comes and looks with me. So people can contact you through there. Now, Bex, you have some questions.
I do. First, I just wanted to say that I actually grew up in the town where Barney and Betty had their experience.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I went to school. I graduated there, high school. So yeah, I live like about an hour and a half from there. And it's funny because I actually didn't hear about it until after I left that town. Didn't even know that was a thing. But my mom was always into UFOs, and she always made the joke that if she saw one, she'd beg them to take her away. So
wow.
like,
Well,
so
I think that there's a lot of activity in New Hampshire there are military bases there.
Yep.
And that road, because I've taken this with my husband, we went to the, was it the 50th anniversary of Betty and Barney? We went to a thing in the town.
Yep.
And we drove down from Canada through Montreal, just like they did.
Yep.
And it's so dark and
so
and such a
yeah.
What's the town?
Lincoln, New Hampshire.
Okay.
But there's also Franconia Notch, which is right near there. Even my son, I told you guys about it before, but my son had experiences driving through there at night, and he saw lights in the sky, and he's like, "Mom, I don't know what's happening." He's on the phone. He's like, "I'm kind of freaking out right now." I'm like, "It's okay. Like they're not going to hurt you. Just acknowledge that you're acknowledging you saw them. That's all you need to do.
Yeah,
you don't have to stress about it." But he was freaking out a little bit because like movies like Signs that traumatized him when he was younger. So he's terrified of that kind of stuff. But it did. He can't hear the intro to that movie, or he freaks out.
Even now he's 23.
It is. I love it.
But it's an idea of the dark side that I have not seen really any evidence of. So.
Right.
You'd think, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, awesome. So I'm going to ask you 2 out of the 3 questions because you've already answered the third. I'll tell you what it is, but you've already answered it throughout the whole show. The first question is, if you had to choose a song to be the theme song of your life for right now, what would that song be?
I Will Survive.
And
you could probably sing it too.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Awesome.
She's living in Canada right now. We know all about surviving winter right now.
Yeah, that's right.
We had 3 seasons yesterday. 4 maybe.
That's right. We've got
weather.
9 months of winter and 3 months of rough sledding.
We're hitting mud season soon, and it's just not.
Yeah, mud season.
Not fun.
Mud season.
Yes. All right. The second question is, if you had to, what is your favorite crystal that you're working with right now?
Ooh, I have several I have several amethyst ones that I use for healing and spiritual attenuation. But I'm really drawn right now to garnets. Garnet, although I haven't, I'm looking for one to purchase. But and I just want to say is with regards to crystals in the interlife, which is where we are before we come into physical form and after we leave physical form, it's where we really live. But in the interlife, I have seen a place that looks like a hospital, but it's not. And it is where people who have crossed over and experienced severe debilitating illness, they get an energetic healing time. And I've seen beings working on their bodies or their etheric bodies with crystals. And I shouldn't say I have seen, I have had described to me. And then I also
you see it in your here.
I do. And then learning to do inner life regression, of course, you're in and out a million times. And I did actually see it myself in one of my own experiences. I said, it's like a hospital, but with no sadness. So
that gave me goosebumps. So I must have had some sort of connection with it somewhere, but that's amazing.
Maybe many of us keep collections of crystals at home.
Yeah. Now we're all crystal hoarders.
Yeah. Well, that probably points to your ability on many levels to have utilized these powerful tools before. They've been utilized here. They're utilized again. They're part of lasers, really. But there's a vibrational healing that isn't totally understood at this point, but I think it will be.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. So the third question was going to be, have you ever experienced extra-dimensional intelligence, visitations, UFO sightings? But we know that now. So what I'm going to ask you, it was right there. Hold on. How what kind of advice would you give someone who is interested in having more contact with benevolent beings in the extra dimensions?
Good question.
Well, I think that meditation is a big key to all of that. And I don't think it really matters what type of meditation practice you choose. Myself, I've been a Vedic, transcendental meditator for 45 years or something, maybe longer, but there's many paths, and I think that if you want to be involved in contact, the first step is getting yourself on a regular meditation program, because what you need to do is shine like a light and speed up your own vibrational persona. And then when you get your meditation practice sorted and you surround yourself with protection, with white light, then I think it just sort of happens, because you are projecting while you're doing this, you're projecting your desire into the universe. And if you are projecting love and communication and bonding and all of these wonderful things, if you're projecting that, those are the kinds of beings that will respond to you.
Yeah, and Dr. Stephen Greer, he talks a lot about that type of thing, and he actually has a guided meditation for people to go through, which is quite hard.
It is. You can, in fact, you can download that as part of his tools for his C5 communication exercises. But I know there's some Vedic chanting involved with that. I have that on my phone. So
me too.
he also would probably say that that's a big part of preparing ourselves for communication. We have to be resonating at a slightly higher frequency than what is common in day-to-day gravity oriented third density Earth.
We have to kind of reach up so they can reach down.
Yeah, that's right. And that's why these wonderful beings who are involved with Mount Shasta, who have been bringing the Zendra to begin to teach us about that.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Oh,
well, we got to have you on again, because,
Oh, I'd love to.
And if you're ever in my area, stop by. I live on a 250-acre farm in the middle of nowhere. So
you know it. I love to go to Ottawa. I haven't been for a while. My husband is a member of the Order of Canada, and the last time I was there was probably when that happened. So, but
don't come now. I shouldn't say that. Don't come today.
Couple months.
No, about the end of the month, before the black guys come. But it's lovely. It's lovely out here. Lovely in Canada. And what part you're in Toronto? In which part of Toronto?
I'm right smack dab in Midtown. I'm near the big corner of Yonge and Eglinton. So
awesome.
I have one of those, great older houses that's over 120 some years old. And I haven't done any remodeling. I'm not into the open concept. I'm into the Canadian closed concept.
Gotcha. I understand.
It works much better with our British ancestry over here.
And our heating systems too.
Yes, it's better.
Heating system. Thank you so much for coming. Bex, have you got our winner from last week?
I do have our winner.
I just have to apologize, guys. We had a Facebook glitch, so we haven't been live. We may be live now, but I will make sure I put the live replay on, so we'll have it live, and you guys can watch it again right after this. I'll put it back on live again. Yeah. But it's been on YouTube live, and on the Breakthrough Show Network live, so we're okay. Fabulous. And it will be in podcast later.
Yes.
So. Wonderful. Well, I just want to thank all you three fantastic women for what you're doing and your intelligent questions. And it was just a whole lot of fun chatting with you today. And I would love to do it again anytime.
Thank you. Awesome. There's so much more we could talk about. So I would love to hear more, definitely. Okay, real quick, the winner of last week's shared out or comments was Catherine Annis. So congratulations, you won the Egyptian Soul Spa meditation. And so make sure you guys, even though if we weren't live on Facebook, you could still share it out. You can still comment and YouTube as well. And we will be able to choose a winner for next week. So we love you guys so much. Have a blessed week. What's today, Rhonda? Is it Passover today or Palm Sunday?
No, it's Palm Sunday.
There it is.
Yeah.
It's Palm Sunday today.
Yeah. Palm Sunday.
Those who celebrate.
Take care and just stay with us for 1 second, Lesley, after we just end this broadcast. Thank you guys.
Sure.
And We'll see you next week.
Namaste.